I'm here in Hong Kong at Linaro Connect, and I'm with Deepak Saxena, our kernel team tech lead. Deepak, what was exciting about having John Corbett of LWN and Greg Core-Hartman of the Linux Foundation and Upstreaming kernel community here with us this week?
Well, I think it's exciting in multiple ways. I think one way it shows that we've gotten involved enough in the community that people really are paying attention to what we're doing. I think people have known about us for a while. We've been putting patches out there and getting things sort of slowly upstreamed. I think it shows that people want to find out more about what we're doing, what are we all about, and how do they affect us in some way, and how do we affect them.
I think it's good to show how important the open collaboration is. It seemed that, that John kicked off that theme, with his keynote, and everybody seemed to follow that in the hallway tracks and even throughout the other tracks. What do you hope that we accomplish after Connect in regards to open collaboration?
Well, I think what I'd like to see is more of our members getting more involved with getting their core platform support upstream. So that was definitely a theme this week. There was John's talk, I gave a presentation on Upstreaming 101, Greg gave his talk today on sort of grumpy maintainers, but why they're grumpy and how the code that they're getting is always the best quality. And a lot of the other sessions we had where we talked about, for example, ARM v8 and also the single Z image work. We kept reiterating this message that you need to get your code upstream, you need to be working with us, you need to release early and release often. So I hope that's a message that sort of the people who are here really take into account, take it back to their employers and we see that happening.
So speaking of the single Z image, when we were here last year, it was still one of those things we couldn't demo, and then we were able to demo it in Copenhagen a few months ago. Where do we sit right now with that image?
So, as you said, we demoed it in Copenhagen. So in Copenhagen, we were able to demo SD card with a single Z image booting on 2 different platforms. Where we're at right now is that we can build what we've sort of rebranded it, the multi-platform kernel now. I think it's less technical than sort of single Z image. We can now build that on several platforms. The ARM Versatile, the TI OMAP can now build as a 3.9 kernel, the Armada XP, Freescale IMX, and by 3.10 we should also have it building in the UX500 and the Samsung Arndale platform. And the other platform that's of interest to Linaro is the Calzita high banking platform. So we've got all those platforms now to the point where we'll have them by 3.10 they can build this multi-platform kernel environment. We had a session today where we talked about kind of what's next and what do we still have to do. So it's sort of the multi-platform kernel is sort of the first step of really being able to have multi-platform distros, which is our ultimate goal, especially for servers. So what's next is going to be some work on taking that multi-platform kernel and bringing it into Linaro's CI loop and actually building multi-platform images and testing them, and then giving feedback to the community developers on things that are still broken, and there's still drivers that need to be modified. So in this work, we've sort of cleaned up a lot of core infrastructure. And there may be out-of-tree drivers that our member companies have that need to be cleaned up to sort of follow the new guidelines that we have in place.
So, speaking of this fruit, this either high fruit, low-hanging fruit, things that need to be done, this cleanup list, and there's a whole community of kernel developers out there. Where if they wanted to help, be part of this future of this single image, I mean. That wasn't even a reality a year ago, and now you thought about it and it's a reality. Where do you want to see them get involved? Like with your team, where do they go to get involved with it?
So there's a couple of places. We have the Linaro wiki, wikilinaro.org. We have a kernel section there, and under that we actually have guidelines from what members need to do, or not just members, anyone needs to do if they want their platform to be able to boot in this multi-platform environment. In terms of interacting with us, the best thing to do is to use the community mailing list. We've tried to do this thing where we don't have separate Linaro mailing lists for things, but we have the upstream communities, and we're working actively in those communities. And we ask people if they've got patches to post them there, and we'll review them. And we've got all our core engineers are on those mailing lists. So the Linux ARM kernel mailing list is the primary list where a lot of the discussions happen around this work.
So don't silo it to our Linaro specific mailing list. Send it upstream and let more eyes look at it. Basically. So, with all the sessions, how many sessions did you have around the kernel this time? Do you know?
This time we had, the kernel team itself had like 4 or 5 sessions, But then if we include some of the sessions from LEG, for example, UEFI, ACPI, while those are not focused just on the kernel, it's primarily, the use of them is how do we get information from the bootloader into the kernel so the system can get up and running. So altogether, I would say we had probably 10 or more sessions that are related to kernel topics. We also had power management sessions, which are run by a power management group, but they all sort of come back to kernel things.
The interview that I did with Greg KH and John Corbett, the one thing that struck me and really surprised me and made me go, yeah, this is what this is all about, is Greg said he was in a session and like 24 companies were in there, and when he sat down, he really thought that everyone was in disagreement. And when he got up, he realized, or when the session ended, he realized everybody was in violent agreement. And I think that shows like why our Connect events are so important to the ecosystem, and why it's really important for people who are interested in this, come here and see what we do and see how we do it, and actually sit down and voice their concerns and watch how we hear that feedback and then apply that feedback. Out of everything that Greg said today in his talk, what excited you most, and what do you hope that the community, other than this is why we're grumpy, what do you hope that not only Linaro internal, but the greater community takes away from his talk?
I like them to take away the kind of the same message that's been reiterated all week long of like, get involved early, get your code out there early, get people's eyes on it early on, because the sooner you do that, the more easily it will go into the kernel. And also the thing that he said, him and the other sort of core subsystem maintainers, that they are there to help. They may seem grumpy, they may push back, they may get personal sometimes, but their job really, whether they're getting paid for it, whether they're just volunteering to be a maintainer, is to help make Linux better. And that's what we're all here for, whether it be Linaro members, whether it be volunteers, whether it be people paid by different entities to work on Linux. We're all trying to make the whole ecosystem of Linux better.
And I think that if people understand that and why he does the things he does, then if you or some of the other kernel developers give pushback from our side, it's really not because you're being grumpy, it's because you're being good citizens and you're taking care of the larger kernel base.
Yeah.
So, because you don't want something that our member does to break,
right?
To break the whole tree. So, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you'd like to tell people about now?
So the other stuff that's exciting that's happening is we've been focusing the last year and a half or so also on Android upstreaming. So basically, working on making the delta between the Android kernel base and upstream kernel a lot smaller. And there's been a lot of really good progress in that in especially the last 6 months, I would say. So since Copenhagen, we've got several features that are very close to being upstream, or already have parts of them upstream. So we're hoping 3.10, 3.11 timeframe, we can sort of checklist off some of these features out. They've made their way upstream and they're being used. We've got them being used by the AOSP kernel base. So I think that's a really exciting development also.
John gave a really good interview with the other guy that's here, Charbax. He gave a really good interview about Android upstreaming, and we had that session as well. And I know it's always risky to make predictions in technology and stuff like that, but there was a while where people said, oh, the Android code, it's not going to be in the mainline kernel, it's not going to be there. How close do you see this getting to where there's not going to be two individual trees, or will there always be two trees?
I think there'll always be two individual trees, just because of the nature of the industry. It's like, as much as we like to say in the community, don't fork, don't fork, don't fork, do upstream things, everything, the nature of building a product is at some point you make a snapshot and you say, I'm going to go ship that snapshot and maintain it. But I think the delta between the snapshot that's used for like the next generation, probably not the next generation, but let's say the next generation Nexus device from Google and the mainstream kernel will be fairly small, because we'll get more of those components upstream. One of the big components that's been really controversial is Binder, and there's work now on possibly doing something with dbus and other IPC in the kernel that would possibly do what Binder does. So over time, I think we'll see that delta getting smaller and smaller, but at the same time, as new use cases come up, we'll see, the Google guys coming up with new things that they want to develop, and we'll probably see the same model. Well, they'll develop something because they're very focused on getting their product out the door and making it available to all the other members of the ecosystem, and then Linaro and other people can help sort of get that code back into mainline.
And for those who, kernel teams as a whole have this like crusty reputation and like, ooh, they're scary people and whatever. And I can honestly say that our team here and other communities that I know about, even the Upstream community, it's not a scary place once you understand how to navigate it. Where would you, I guess I want people to understand that if they want to get involved, no matter what level of developer they are, if they have an interest in either the upstreaming with Android, you know, getting more patches upstream through Linaro and what we do, that it is a good environment. It is a friendly, welcoming environment for people to get involved in. And I think your team is a great example of that. I think all the teams at Linaro are, but I think out of all the teams, the kernel teams kind of get stuck with the, you know, either not deserved reputation of, you know, not now anyway. What is some low-hanging fruit that you'd like to see people kind of help your team with?
So there's a lot of cleanup work that needs to be done. So there's this janitorial work that needs to happen, and there's a kernel janitors like community actually a mailing list, and there's a lot of ARM stuff there that needs to be done. So today at the single Z image talk, we talked about, you know, how we've really gotten to a point where the device tree files have sort of gotten a little bit complex and a little unmanageable. So we kind of go through them and clean them back up, and there's testing is a big area also. You know, the coverage of testing that we do will get bigger and bigger. We have some really good discussions about how do we as Linaro help the upstream community and kernel.org improve the quality of the kernel. You know, but just having people grab a kernel and sort of, you know, random RC and just build it across a bunch of ARM configurations and say, oh, this worked or this didn't work. You know, if they have random devices, play with booting the latest kernel on those random devices and see how well it actually works in a real use case.
Well, I think it's exciting. I think everything that's coming out of this Connect is going to, you know, every time I say that, I overuse the word exciting at every one of these, but it's been a really educational Connect this time. It's not just been the planning, but we've had, you know, the stuff that you've done, the stuff that the Android team's done, the networking sessions. I mean, we've just had so many training opportunities here, and with you with your Upstreaming 101. So thank you for doing all that, and I look forward to seeing what's going to come out of this. You know, what comes out of all this training and all these planning sessions. So thank you for sitting down with me today, and in this horrible weather that we're having here in Hong Kong.
Horrid.
And I just look forward to the future.
Me too. Thank you very much.